they spent a cumulative 4 hours with Julius Jones, and now think that they can speak on this character that he has.
Right.
And obviously,
which is kind of scary.
Well, it is. It's terrifying.
And they want him mentoring other young
Who would want to convict of murder?
Active gang member.
Yep.
Convicted of murder. 12 jurors convicted him.
Doing drugs in prison.
13 court appellate judges convicted him. The Oklahoma Supreme Court convicted him. He tested positive for drugs while on death row. So you get out, 1-2 hours a day? So in this time, in those 2 hours, he's gotten drugs and he's gotten how many tattoos while on lockdown on death row? How many?
All further incriminating.
This is gang-related tattoos. Like, why would anybody want someone like that
to mentor
out?
their child?
Would you
And
want your
to
kid?
mentor
Yeah.
your children?
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
All I know about that meeting is when we all walked in there, I remember the first 5 minutes thinking that we were in a twilight zone and that we had our cards stacked against us. From how the committee members were speaking and the questions they were asking, I just felt like we had our backs up against the wall right off the bat. Don't you guys?
I think their decision was already made. It was predetermined. We have board members retweeting justice for Julius hashtags, and it just
Doesn't make sense.
why did we even show up?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because they didn't want to listen to a word. There was one member that listened to us. Nobody else, I think, even gave a shit that we were there.
On the Pardon and Parole Board's website for commutations, it says if the application is passed to stage 2, the offender will have a personal appearance with the Pardon and Parole Board via video conferencing. If an offender receives a misconduct prior to the hearing, the personal appearance is stricken or canceled, and the offender becomes ineligible for commutation at the scheduled hearing.
That was addressed within the first 5 minutes.
Right, and they said
It wasn't addressed. They just said we're not gonna.
they just said
We're not going to honor
care.
it.
They didn't
They're
care. We're
not
not
gonna
gonna
honor
honor
it.
it.
So
It was
they-
challenged by the prosecution, by the state.
So they blatantly disregarded their own rule, and it also states that if they change a rule, that they have to do several publications of this new rule, and they have to publish the amendment on this Secretary of State website prior to the change in the rule. First of all, there were several rules that they have that are all lined up on their website that they blatantly disregarded, none of which they published these changes to. Several of those were made 2 days before the hearing.
On a Saturday.
And so, on a Saturday, so there's no way that they could have made all the necessary publications for it. And
So, just to be clear, the only real change that was made was the amount of time given to both the defense and the prosecution.
correct, and then I think
It
it
started
wasn't
with
the
5
time
minutes.
of, yeah.
And so that's why they, again, in my opinion, the reason they changed that was to allow the defense more time to give their case where it was 5 minutes. I mean, there's no way you can, argue a capital murder case.
Yeah,
in
they
5
had way
minutes.
more lies than 5 minutes would last.
Right, but then by virtue of the questions, they ended up with an hour and 5 minutes, which is double what.
They made a comment about, violations and misconduct should have just disqualified anybody from.
Right, and that wasn't in their new rules.
No, that was
They're
an old
allowed
one.
misconduct.
But they even.
They're violating.
They're violating their own
Because at the
rule.
time of his application, since his application was submitted, he has had 3 misconducts since the application.
Including the drug test
That's
positive
one
for
of them.
benzodiazepine
Right.
controlled substance.
Right.
But they even challenged the board about that, the state did. And the board's own general counsel said moments before the hearing began that the board had no process to fact check any of those deals, which
And it
so
should
they
terrify
have
us
rules,
as
but
the
they didn't have a way
community
to check them. Yeah.
to know that any of
Yeah.
these people that go up for
It's-
commutation, their applications, there's no way to say if they're false or not, if they're lying
I
on
mean,
it.
it's
That should
imperative.
terrify
It's
us.
imperative that
It-
the board has to rely on the validity of the application and their investigator. Since there's this huge influx of commutation applications, the board has had to go out and hire independent investigators to really do the due diligence prior to bringing it to the board for their review. And this investigator missed the positive drug test. So they, the board was unaware of it, but in the state's motion that was filed
They
2 weeks
presented it to
before,
her,
Yeah.
they told them about it. But
They
again,
chose
just
over
like we were talking about was, the questions that they were asking, board member Morris was asking them. Those are all questions or answers that was in the supplements that were provided to the board.
Yeah.
Obviously, they didn't.
Yeah, they
Just
just
asking about
not
how
even-
the appellate process works.
They had a special
Yeah, they
pardon
had
and parole
a
meeting on May
meeting.
25th that they went over. It was a 6-hour training on the appellate process. So the fact that they asked and baited pretty much so that they could go on about this was pretty astonishing to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that they had just been, they knew the questions to the answers that they were asking. So obviously that was a blatant, like I said, baiting to
And
get
that was done to give
them more time to speak.
Yes, the
Well, they-
defense more
they
time to
chose-
talk about their
They threw a
case.
question out there, and Amanda Bass, she was completely went on a tangent on a totally different subject.
Yeah, the Howell family got 30 minutes, the prosecution got 30 minutes, and the defense team got an hour and 5 minutes. The questions by the Pardon and Parole Board steered them into talking for an extra 35 minutes. But I think that, like we were all saying, the point of that and the fact of the matter is we went into a bloodbath pretty much. We did not have a chance against what the pardon and parole was going to do. So, why did we even go? They weren't listening to us. They had predetermined what they were going to do beforehand. They had blatantly shown that by the fact that they were retweeting people. They were on boards. I think that the fact that they put special considerations on one person in one case, that if these things were given to every other criminal that this stuff happened to, the Irvin Box, that big defense attorney, came out saying that now he's going to go back and have them review all of these capital cases that he has tried.
They've set a precedent.
They have set a precedent, and Smotherman said that, the one person that said no, he said, we are setting a precedent with this case. And we have, documentation. This Irvin Box said, you know what? Now it's going to be, I'm going to have a guy that didn't just kill one person. He's going to kill 5 people. And on this precedent, we're going to go in and I'm going to use the Julius Jones case as now this is the record. And I'm going to say, hey, you know what? You didn't make him do it. He had all these cases where they had misconducts that now, because they offered him special consideration, all this blanket of people. And that again is, as Oklahomans, should infuriate people. It should scare us to death. This is now a public safety issue.
Right.
Because if they're going to let them off, they can't say, no, we're not going to do this for everybody else now.
Right.
It was just Julius Jones that we're going to allow to have this. Was it because he had money backing him up? Was it because of politics? Was it because, what are the reasons? And again, I don't think that they are necessarily, I don't think that they are doing anything malicious. I think they have ultimate good intent to try and do this kind of stuff, but I don't think that they're realizing that what they are doing right now is now going to domino effect. It is now going to hit all these other cases. People are coming out saying, we're going to need to retry these things. And I don't think that anybody understands the magnitude of that. And
another thing I want to bring up is Kelly Doyle's response when she voted yes. She said, well, he was 19 years old at the time, studies show that his brain wasn't fully developed, which honestly kind of pissed me off, because it's like, okay, well, if you can go fight in a war at 18, you can vote, you can do all this.
Sit on a jury.
if you can sit on a jury and dish this sentence
You can
out and
also
sentence someone, you should be able.
You can also commit a murder.
Yeah.
You
And-
are mentally
Of
able.
course.
Well,
Like-
we have documented letters that he wrote to people that said that he should be dead or in jail for life for the things that he has done. So he was obviously at 19 aware that he could be sentenced to life for.
Right.
He was aware that he could go down he could be sentenced for life. He was aware of what would happen if you
He
do
was
these things.
consciously making
So-
decisions to card
So he
trap,
was aware that
Yeah.
his actions could lead to his sentence that he got.
Yeah.
So you can't argue that. it's like he said right there that he was aware that this is what could happen. So you can't say that, you know what, he was 19. I was his age. I was friends with his, friends that he knew. I was right there. And there's a big difference from what I was doing in college at the time to what he was doing.
When I was 19,
Because we know the difference between right and wrong, period. It's
Yeah.
not up for contest on what your age is.
Right.
Well, and Hayden, when we did something wrong at that age, we were punished for it.
And we knew what would happen. I mean, I'm pretty sure that any of us at the age of 19 know if you're going to go out and shoot someone in the head, what's going to happen to you, especially at that time in Oklahoma.
Or steal a car.
And that's the thing is we did not impose as a family, I just want that out, like we did not impose that sentence to him. We had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
The state of Oklahoma imposed that sentence.
Yep.
And so like, but
And when
again,
he committed the crime, he knew the punishment. Everybody knows that when you kill somebody, there's a chance you get it.
It just shows they're making up their own.
they're making up their own
They're
rules.
making
And
up their
again,
own
that's the
rules
point that
for
should
this
scare
case,
everybody.
And that's not what their job is.
Yeah, I mean, if you clear,
That's not fair.
yeah, if you clear everything else off the table, the fact that they are cherry picking their rules for a particular case is not right.
Yeah.
I think it's important to that 19-year-old statement by Doyle. I think 100% proves that she's not impartial
Right.
on this case. She already had, her reasons for it, and I think, Amy said their job was to help with criminal justice reform. I know what you're saying, but it's not true. Their job is to partially review each case for not only public safety but the victims. Then it's the reintegration of inmates if it's correct. And so they're switching the order of their values on the website, and what they're supposed to do. Their job is not criminal justice reform. It's to review each case as its own case, and that was not done in girls' case by not doing what their values, their mission statement, what they put out and what they do. They're not doing. They're pushing personal agenda and emotion, and the justice system you have to take a line. If not, they need to move on. Which I know is preaching to the choir to you guys, but I think we need to hear from all that they're not doing that portion.
I agree. The thing about this case with our family is in all these aspects, like it just became a burden for us to bear, sadly. And things like the Pardon and Parole Board, social media misinformation spread, which no one on this earth right now can say that there's not misinformation in the media. But I think that sadly, it has become this family's burden to bear. And that's why we're feeling like we have to speak about it because it's something that none of us asked to be a part of this, nor
Yeah, for like the
anything.
viewers watching this, do you actually think we want to be doing this?
Yeah.
Like,
it's
I mean, like we want to speak up for what's right, but it hurts.
yeah.
I'd like to say something about the Pardon and Parole Board. They're governed by rules, not laws. And if they decide that they don't want to follow those rules, there's nobody to govern. They just don't follow the rules. And they just say, I'm not going to. It's just like when they asked Luck to recuse himself. He said, not going to. That's
Yeah.
it. Nobody questioned him. Nobody did anything. He just said, nope, not going to. Same with Kelly Doyle.
It goes to show you, board member Scott Williams, did recuse himself the day of.
Well, yeah, reluctantly. And he knew what
Because the state discovered that he is on a team of a sports agent lawyer, Kelly Masters, who was chosen by the Jones as one of the 3 advocates who spoke during the hearing. And just a side note, we were the ones, as in one of us were the ones who actually found out that she was associated with Mr. Williams. He had no intentions of divulging this information to the Pardon and Parole Board.
Mhm.
Or to the governor when he placed him on the board.
Yeah,
Correct.
which I thought was very peculiar considering he knows the status of this case. He's on a website and involved with this person who's talking on behalf. That is right there.
it's not a little, I mean, that is a big conflict of interest.
And to clarify, that was the one that recused himself. The DA's office requested 2 others recuse themselves, and just like you said, Megan, they said, no, we're not going to. And they said, no problem, because they financially benefit from the outcomes of certain
Exactly.
cases, which is baffling to me. Another thing that we haven't mentioned yet is Bob Macy. They reference him a lot, so I want to make sure to address that because I know that they do that. Wes Lane was the district attorney at the time of the trial, not Bob Macy as the defense's representative. So I think that's very important. Wes Lane also warned that what the board did for Julius, in fairness, they must do for all other inmates.
Mhm.
And Wes Lane, among others, have come out and said that.
Right. All these people who are involved in the criminal justice system that actually, have credibility and they're not looking at this broader picture of how this is going to affect people. And if we're going to be a person for anything. It should be for future victims, that this could happen to them. And you know what? That person that murdered your loved one could just be out on a technicality because they decide.
Right.
Because they think that something in between those 5 people that they think, you know, they should walk free because of that. It doesn't matter. What's the point of even having a trial now? I mean, what's the point of even arresting people if they're just gonna, I mean, if they're
spit in the face of every judge and jury that has ever sat in
yes.
and tried a case, every appellate judge who has ever heard an appeal,
Correct.
every one of them, they are an embarrassment to the people of Oklahoma,
Mm-hmm.
to our state. They are an absolute embarrassment, and they are dangerous.
That's what I think. I think that we're putting ourselves in a very dangerous place because of this.
Well, and guys, I think, to be fair, that's why we're here today.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously for justice for Paul, but at the end of the day, we want our fellow Oklahomans to feel safe.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, more specifically, Megan, Rachel, the
Yeah.
people that were right there and their names and faces are plastered all over the news.
Mm-hmm.
What about the fellow Oklahomans that this guy gets let out of jail? You're comfortable with him living down the street from you?
Yeah.
That gives me the chills. It makes me sick.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the money we could save. We could get rid of judges and juries and prosecutors, appellate courts. All this money we could save, we'll just send them straight to the Pardon and Parole Board because they are infinitely intelligent. They know in a matter of a couple of hours to cut through the crud, separate the wheat from the chaff, and they can make a decision and they're right every time. And if they don't have any rules, they can probably do it very quickly in less than 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, they're not right every time because they're under investigation by the OSPI for letting Lawrence Anderson
Why,
out.
Clayton, how can you question the Pardon and Parole Board like that?
And what did he do?
He is a cannibal murderer.
Okay.
Triple murder.
Yep.
Triple murder. Because they let him out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really disgusting how politicized and publicized just through celebrity that all this
Again.
Board,
Mhm.
yeah,
Here we are.
It's just, oh, well, I want to get higher in politics. Oh, I want to get higher in this. So I'm going to jump on this justice for Julius because it seems to be going the right way. So let's just keep going.
And it's fueled by money and media.
Fueled by money and media, and it's just disgusting because we're not safe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This has nothing to do with politics. We've got people at this table that are Democrats, Republicans. We have different opinions on a lot of issues.
Full spectrum here.
Doesn't matter. That is thrown out the window, and we're looking at one thing.
Right
Yeah.
versus wrong. The facts versus the fiction. The truth versus lies. Literally. It's just, all you gotta do is open your eyes and look. It's right there.
And that's why we're here, is because we want the truth to be heard from the people that have looked at it, that care about it, and we want the public to get on the right side or get out of it.
Yeah.
If you don't want to know and you're not going to take the time to do your own research, bow out.
Yeah.
Follow the
Yeah,
facts and evidence.
exactly.
Yes, follow the facts and evidence. But if you're going to retweet, sign petitions, know what you're signing.
Yeah.
That is
Know what you're signing.
Double-edged sword of social media and you know, the influence that it can have. You know, it can be good or bad. And so it's a good lesson.
Yeah, and I think Brian spoke about it in his interview, but the 501(c) that is behind their camp, the anti-death penalty, you know, that's a lot of money that's coming against us. And I think that's a big part of it as well.
But this is not the place to argue the death penalty. It's the legislature's job and the people's job to decide about the death penalty. They're to decide about the facts of the case and whether it's correctly prosecuted and whether there is something else should be done.
Mm-hmm.
We're not here to argue about the death penalty at the Parole and Parole Board hearings.
Right. And they all took an oath to say that they wouldn't let their personal interests conflict with the way that the outcome is. And
And they did.
In an interview, Kelly Doyle admitted after she was selected as a Pardon and Parole Board member that she applied as a joke, because why would they hire someone that has been publicly against the
Just goes to show you.
yeah. And again, like how did this get here? You know, I think that that's a question we probably all ask ourselves. And everybody has always come to us and been like, why didn't you speak out before? Why didn't you say something?
Yeah.
And again, how in our wildest dreams would we ever have thought that we would have wound up here? Because it was a Loctite case. Again, I have wanted to stand up. I talked to Megan about this for all of these people that work so tirelessly for our family.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, it was about taking a murderer off of the streets. Period.
Everybody
It
was
had
supportive
nothing
of
to
it.
do with politics. It had nothing to do with the death penalty. It had nothing to do with any of these things. It had to do with getting a dangerous person who murdered a man in front of his children and sister off of the streets. Period. That was what it was.
For a car.
For a car. Again,
That could have asked him for his keys.
Yeah.
but it's all of these people, the detectives, the police officers, everyone who was involved, even the eyewitnesses, everybody was trying to do good by what they were saying. There was not any agenda behind any of it. And it was just getting this guy off. So, I mean, why in the world would we ever have thought that something like this would have taken off? I mean, it's beyond me. It had every piece of what they could spin it to make it into all of these agendas that are going on right now. It really did. Like, sadly, it had each of these pieces that they could be like, oh man, we could spin this. And you don't think that they sat around and shopped stories. They picked it because it was going to ignite all of these people, and it was going to ignite all of these sides. And it was going to ignite the emotion, which is what the Pardon and Parole Board and everybody else in America is basing their thoughts on. This is based off of emotion, not based off of anything else. And again, that's what drives me crazy. People are like, oh, you guys didn't say anything. I'm like, because again, ours isn't, ours is based off of emotion for like the sadness. Yes, it didn't. Who in the world would have thought that this case that went through all these appeals and all these things, and everybody, even outside of the original team, was like, no way. And then all of a sudden it can get here based on assumptions by a team out of Arizona who, again, were looking to push agendas. You know, I've looked into their kind of stuff, and I've looked into what they've been doing and juror tampering. I mean, they've done all these kind of other things, and they've got agendas. And again, it's not about the politics of it, but they picked it. It had all the right ingredients. It made for this huge story. And now we're here, and we are having to fight for this. And outside of all the other trauma that all of you guys have been through and had to live with, and we all have, it's just, it's heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, they've said that the DA has closed the file while the trial is going on for Jones's new lawyer. Well, that's obviously not true. There's been an open record request for a long time, and anybody in Oklahoma has been allowed to access the file. Delbage not only is not registered in Oklahoma, but he also has hired investigators to go around and intimidate witnesses and try to get people to change their story.
He's not a licensed lawyer in the state of Oklahoma, therefore he's not granted access. He has to be licensed
So he was
to
denied
get access.
He was denied access, but it was also on the basis that they had gone to one of the jurors, Juror X.
The objection that we filed when Mr. Bache, who currently represents Mr. Jones, when Mr. Bache and his investigators were engaging in critically unethical and inappropriate behavior with jurors. And at that point, Mr. Prater denied Mr. Bache access to the file. Access was never denied to Mark Barrett or to Amanda Bass. Neither one of them ever came and made a request to be allowed to go through the file. They could go through the file today if they wanted to go through the file. We have hidden nothing in our file. One of the reasons that Mr. Prater prohibited Dale Bache from becoming involved and coming over and looking at the file was because of what they did with one of the jurors in the trial. Juror X, his last name starts with an X. Two investigators from the Federal Public Defender's Office in Arizona came to his house and approached him and wanted to get him to sign an affidavit, but didn't want to let him read the affidavit before he signed it. When this juror expressed hesitancy over signing an affidavit that he wasn't going to be able to read it in its entirety, this tells you the depths that they will go to.
And so it went under investigation. And I have heard through hearsay that there are people that were in the last offense, and through some sources that that's the same technique that Dale Bache and his team use in their investigators to get them to say stuff in affidavits that weren't actually true. So, I mean, it's on record. He's done it in a couple other cases, and he is, I mean, I think it's under investigation that that's what he's been doing. So, I mean, it just kind of goes to show all those things that they say are these signed affidavits. I mean, to me, if we're going to be talking credibility, now I'm going to be like, that's bull, you know? Because if you guys are doing this, then, I mean,
The defense
Not
has
gonna
never
believe.
taken any of their case before a jury in the court system, the judicial system.
thank you.
Yeah, so they haven't had to prove any of it. So that's why they're able to use these outrageous lies,
Hmm.
and they don't have to prove anything. That's
Right.
it. And that's what it's all based on. Social media, it's the court. Social media, not the real criminal court. It just makes it. So,
Yeah.
What got me on the part on parole board hearing was one of the committee members said that they think he should maybe be mentoring other kids.
Mhm. And
That about
all
made
of
me
which,
sick.
all of which he said he spent 2 hours, and same with the other. I don't think we can use names, but the other person that was there for him. It's a public trial. So they spent a cumulative 4 hours with Julius Jones, and now think that they can speak on this character that he has.
Right.
And obviously,
Which is
he's-
kinda scary.
Well, it is. It's
And they
terrifying.
want him mentoring other young
I mean,
children.
Who would
you
want to
said you're
convict
active-
with murder?
Active gang member,
Yep.
convicted of murder. 12 jurors convicted him.
Doing drugs in prison.
13 court appellate judges convicted him. The Oklahoma Supreme Court convicted him. He tested positive for drugs while on death row. So you get out, 1-2 hours a day? So in this time, in those 2 hours, he's gotten drugs and he's gotten how many tattoos while on lockdown on death row? How many?
All further incriminating.
This is and gang-related
Absolutely.
tattoos. Like, why would anybody want someone like that
To mentor
Out.
their child.
Would you
And
want
to
your kid?
mentor-
Yeah.
your children?
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
He's a pathological liar and he wants to get out of prison. So he's going to tell them what they want to hear and he's going to play right into their hands.
Right.
And
Okay.
like
A lot of time
Hayden
to think
said,
about it.
these people come to these conclusions
You're right.
after spending a cumulative time of 4 hours with this man. I mean, you heard him on The Last Defense where he's writing poetry and doing this and that. He will say whatever he wants to say to get himself out of prison and to gain sympathy and empathy from the public.
I think kind of a point to that where he's getting spoon-fed this stuff, and he's not an idiot. I mean, hence their entire supporters, think he's such a guy. But it also leads me, and I've mentioned this to many of our family members, that so we've got this guy, and he is saying that Christopher Jordan fabricated this elaborate framing scheme. He has put together. I mean, the real story is with this Christopher Jordan apparently framing this whole thing. Because, you've got 9 witnesses, eyewitnesses, corroborating a timeline and the same story of who did it, right? Then you've got, so you've got all this stuff, you've got these alibis, all these new things coming in. So again, we are saying that Christopher Jordan came up with this elaborate framing scheme, right? Locked tight for almost 22 years. DNA, he was able to gather DNA, get it on this stuff. Hide a magazine of the bullets behind a door chime at the Joneses' house. He was able to
in his car.
put the evidence in his car, put it in the crawl space. He
Put
was
the
able to put
evidence
it
in Jones's car.
Jones's
Yeah.
car, put it in his room, do all this, unbeknownst to anybody else.
And not get any DNA
Not
on
get
it.
any DNA on it, corroborate 9 stories, but then when he goes to talk to the investigators, he can't get his own story straight. So how are we supposed to believe that he put that all together and still can't get his own story straight, right? So, we've got this other side of it, and I'm just like, that just does not make any logical sense. To any of these people, we're looking at this guy, but he can't get his story straight there, but he was able to manage to get everyone else's story straight because he was the one that plotted this. Like, that's ridiculous. Yeah, exactly. It's like, if there's a story here, that should be the story. This criminal freaking mastermind was able to pull the wool for 22 years over everybody's eyes, with the exception of a few jailhouse snitches that now the Jones team are saying that these are now these confessions.
Let's clarify that you're talking about Christopher Jordan.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm talking about Christopher
With
Jordan.
the help of Liddell.
Right. Yeah. I think it
So-
just makes me so angry. I'm like, do people really believe that?
Yeah.
No,
Honestly.
they shouldn't.